Sinos and Travar. I pronounced that last one right. And their folk and their kinsfolk, so they brought their families, who took with them all the Rus and migrated. Alright? Took everybody that they know and they migrated there. So basically what the Slavics did was set a stage, an interesting stage, that pretty much, okay, all our nobility, all our authority are Vikings. All the upper echelons of each of their society became foreign. So technically they're back in occupation. Symbolically they're under occupation. So, either or, right? Now, what I love about this is you're going to start questioning a little bit here. Okay, 3 brothers. Why would they uproot a bunch of people? Well, in Scandinavia, the idea of fertile land was getting scarce. The population was outgrowing its bounds for geographical subsistence and life support. Couldn't really support itself no more. So that's why the Vikings did what they did. It was one of the major causes. So they send their families, sons, brothers of a family. And this is what they actually did in Scandinavia. The sons would leave their home to go set forth and establish their own. Get their own plot of land and establish their own family. So hey, we just got a free invitation. Let's go down there. There's tons of land. Hundreds, thousands of square miles and kilometers of land. And land that could be burned, harvested, and everything else. Hello, we're going to take this option. And that's exactly what they did. Yeah, they really took this option. So, that's pretty much how that happens. So the idea of these 3 brothers. Now, what is it like in a family if you grew up with brothers or siblings? What do? Doesn't matter how old you are, actually. You fight over things, don't you? Well, we're going to have 3 brothers setting up 3 things, and they're going to rival each other. Perfectly natural. At the same time, there's still no really unity. It's a little bit more, it's a step closer. There's still going to be war, wouldn't you think, right? So then so that's pretty much how it happens. And out of the top becomes this legendary, out of the 3 brothers, one's going to stand on top. One's going to be the powerhouse. One's going to make the choices. One's going to make the steps. One's going to establish the foundation. Give Russia its first dynasty, its first lineage of rulers. And he was going to be pretty much the leader for it. No. So, Royer. So, he becomes the first. One of the broader dynasty. That's what he does. So now, Russia's got another ingredient. Well, the Slavs at the time, it was not really known as Russia at the time, but in this part of the world is to have another ingredient towards establishing a great civilization as much as a polity to expand. And this sets forth Russia's ever-ending expansion for a long, long time. Now, there's a map in here, which is really good. It gives about 800 to 1000 AD, pretty much Scandinavian migrations. You know, across the sea to Newfoundlands, throughout France, modern-day France and Spain, throughout the Mediterranean. But the ones that we really focus on, and what I focus on in Viking history, is their migrations to Novgorod down to Kiev, down pretty much to in the Volga. So, which pretty much is the heartland, or pretty much comes to heartland throughout history of the Russian people. Okay? So you have to understand all these major aspects. So, trade builds. Now, the great thing about this is, and pretty much, it gave the name to the Russian people of the Russian state. Kievan Rus. Rus. Russian. Alright? The Russian state. Now, so basically in the 18th century, Scandinavian Norse society experienced a wave of expansion which took Vikings and their longships across the world as raiders, merchants, and explorers. Think about these three aspects. Over some 2 centuries, 200 years they were doing this. The ever expansion. Because what was happening in Scandinavia, it took to the breaking point, and the Vikings exploded everywhere. They were like, they exploded. They were going in all directions. Their presence was felt in a good chunk of the world. And they made it felt wherever they went. Now, we all know the Western expansion, so we're going to skip that. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The Varangian Guards are a very important source within Byzantine history. Very important. You hear a lot of this throughout Russian history. That word still exists in Russia in a lot of aspects. And for the Byzantines, they were not merchants, but they were mercenaries that fought in the Byzantine Empire. And that's what they were known as. And this is where they originated from. So, now, they were pretty much like armed merchants. We're coming to get our stuff. You don't like it, too bad. Kind of thing. Well, that's pretty much what happened. Now, it doesn't give us a whole lot of what starts happening in Kiev. Kiev starts to develop, alright, at this time. And it's really interesting. This is what I'm going to do the next lecture on. It's pretty much surrounding a lot of Kiev history. You know. Lots of things start to establish. You had the Volga Bulgars. They start establishing. You had the Khanate of Kazan starting to develop. Political structures start to develop. Culture starts to develop. And a lot of other things start to develop. So, either or, it's very interesting when it comes down to it. But the Russians, the Vikings were everywhere. They have a huge presence and Slavic presence within Byzantine history. This becomes an interesting connection after a time. We're going to spend a couple of lectures looking at actually the relationship between the Byzantine Empire and the polity of Kievan Rus. So, which is really cool. It's one of my greatest relationships to study. Now, they settled down in the city of Novgorod in the north. Okay? That's where they're from. Now, he was succeeded by his son Igor. And stuff like this. Who established himself in Kiev. So pretty much you have this family allegiance southwards. So, what happens in the primary chronicle, if you get a source, you can actually buy it, it's really expensive. But if you ever go to a public library or a lot of pretty much university libraries will have this, it's a nice read. Let's put it that way. It's a nice read. And overall, I would recommend anybody reading it. If you want to take it as a fairy tale, it is It's everything. It's for girls and guys. It's for men and women. It's a great piece of literature.